Hey, I'm Jeff, and I make music with my brother.
Hi, I'm Jonathan, and I also make music with my brother.
Together, we are Ekko and Sidetrack, and we make music that sounds like this.
And this.
And even this. This podcast is about music, creativity, and everything in between.
Welcome to A Band Apart with Ekko and Sidetrack.
You may have noticed yesterday that we have announced we're playing Mardi Gras Festival in New Zealand. If you're in New Zealand in late June, you should come on down.
I think it's the 15th or the 16th and the 23rd off the top of my head, or the 17th and the 23rd. Around that zone, we'll be in Queenstown.
We're doing it again, starting with a great plug.
And in Owakani in the North Island.
It's a sick festival.
Yeah, amazing. My memory of going to that festival was landing in the airport and getting picked up by Sarah and driving in the van with like Brendan and Carl, and then just turning up at this place, and people were telling us like, oh yeah, they turned the whole town into like this festival, and I was like, what does that even mean and everything? And then you saw it, and it was like,
it's like a set. It looks like a Western set.
It does. Feels like a Western set where a festival just takes place, and we're on that stage, and the way that people crammed in, and it was a big vibe.
That's the first time we met Rothy Reds.
Yep. So shout out to Michael.
Hey, Michael.
A bunch of the New Zealand crew, actually.
Yeah, that was such a sick time.
Yeah, and we look forward to repeating it.
Yeah.
And sharing a bunch of new music and
having fun.
Having fun.
Having fun.
Still croaky.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I think just
having too much fun.
Having too much fun. That's what I like to do. Have too much fun. The other thing you might have noticed on our socials is that we're starting to share a bit more from the writing trip that we did down in Denmark.
Which is the conception moment of some of the music that you will hear
on the album. Yeah. Jeff and I have been talking about doing a writing trip for a while. We've spoken to other artists about experiences they've had.
Particularly inspiring one would have been Woody Ethwood.
Yeah, because Woody's, I think a couple of times he's gone to Finland.
Yep.
And like hired a cabin and just kind of isolated himself for a week or two and just written a bunch of stuff. Tom Metric recently has done one as well. And so we wanted to do that. So we rented an Airbnb down in Denmark, which is southwest of Western Australia. Southwest of Western Australia.
Yep.
And took our studio down there and basically didn't go on social media or like didn't talk to anyone else.
Yeah, we just shut ourselves off from the world until there was a reason to talk to people, which was some pretty significant bushfire action near us, which caused a bit of stress.
Yeah.
And then we started talking to our significant others as well because there was some other extra stresses going on there. But we nailed it for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then we maintained isolation and full immersion, should we say, in the creative process.
Yeah. There was something about being able to wake up, go downstairs, and
the music was just there.
The music's there. And like someone starts working on music while the other one makes breakfast or, there's nothing else to do apart from make music. And if you weren't doing that, you were going for a walk. Or we had, some movies we could watch or play a bit of FIFA.
Yeah, we'd finish most nights with FIFA.
Yeah.
Shout out to Sarah for providing that.
Thanks, Sarah. And I haven't played it since.
No, neither have I. But we'd have epic battles.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, I think it's good to have something to break up the creativity.
Yeah.
Because it's exhausting. Like, I remember, the first night we got down there, we set up the studio. We did the sound. Sonar works.
Yep.
So the monitors were calibrated to the room that we were in. And, we stayed up a bit later to do all that so we could just wake up and be like, sick, turn it on, let's start. And I think the first couple of days, it was like fresh and new. And maybe it was the third day where we didn't have a great day. Maybe we had an argument. Maybe it was a bit slow. Nothing was really clicking. And we were like, what the fuck? We've invested in this time. Like, we've got to be productive every day. And we realized that, like, hey, you don't, like, you're not, just because you've done all the things in place doesn't mean you're going to get it every day. In fact, it's more important to have a break and to recognize there's going to be a bad day in the studio.
Yeah, and being okay with that and going and doing something else.
Exactly. Not just being like, we're going to work for 12 hours a day for 10 days. Like, you're going to get exhausted. You're going to get distracted. You're going to want to go do something else. And that's okay. And that was a real learning point, not to push, to know when to push and know when to ease, which I found really helpful. But it was fun, man.
In hindsight, a year on, how do you think it went?
Yeah, it's basically exactly a year. A year and a month. I think it went really well. I think it would have been. I think it went really well. I think there's songs on the album that exist because we went down there.
Yep, totally.
One of them being the next single.
Is it?
Yeah, because it used to be called Treehouse.
Oh, yeah.
And we called it Treehouse because we were making music in a treehouse.
Yeah, and it had a kind of different lead. Yes, it's almost like a stick with me on this. It's almost like a sourdough starter. You know how people are like, the sourdough starter is 100 years old. It doesn't mean that sourdough starter is 100 years old. It's existed from the same foundation.
Yeah.
This tune was called Treehouse, but there's probably like 3 or 4 elements in the song that was in the original, but the idea was conceived there.
Yeah.
And it's definitely evolved. There's been probably 4 or 5 like real inflection points where it's grown, but it might not have happened the way it happened if not for that trip.
No. And then I think there's also, that's where we wrote, it was easy.
Yep.
And yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And like, you've, yeah. Yeah. Like there's going to be, it was really important, I think. I think that also like showed us that, okay, this framework of writing works, and it works for us. And it was fun to just create freely. Like, we had the keyboard down there, we had a couple of synths down there. Guitars.
We had our yoga mat set up, so every morning we just start with a big stretch session, some coffee, meditate, read.
Have some mushrooms.
Yeah. Yes, I think the mushrooms were helpful.
Yeah, just nibbling at them. Did help.
I'd like to do that again up here, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing back to the review, do you think there were some moments of stress?
Yeah.
Do you think they were warranted? It's easy enough to say post that it's like, of course it wasn't warranted because nothing happened.
About the fire?
Yeah, there was a few things that became quite distracting.
Yeah, I think like...
Because there was a fuck-off bushfire there.
Yeah.
Had the wind gone the other direction, I think the town might have been a bit in trouble.
At the time, there were kind of... there was a big fire down in Denmark, and we were kind of like on this hill on the side of a estuary.
And we were a large distance away from the fire.
Yeah.
And we asked Holly's dad, who's a career firefighter, what does he think?
Hey, Paul.
Hey, Paul. Hey, Holly.
Hey, Hol.
And he gave us great reassurance.
Yeah. But we were also watching, like, refreshing a fire map because it had, like, zones where they were suggesting to evacuate.
Yeah.
And there was even discussion between Jeff and I, and potentially an argument about, like, look, do we semi-pack up?
Yeah.
And chuck it in the car so we're ready? Or like, are we going to write music today? Like what are we going to do? Because remember that morning that I woke up and it was like...
It smelled like smoke.
It smelled like smoke everywhere and you couldn't see.
Yeah, it was quite hazy.
And I was like, is the fire like close? Fuck.
And I think you are maybe a little bit more paranoid than I am.
I think I'm more risk averse in some scenarios. I think about the scenario I just thought about was when you and Ben were walking in America and you guys went over the tracks.
Oh,
and
yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah.
I think I'm more like, it's probably not fine. We should be more careful.
Okay.
Less than paranoid. Paranoid suggests that there's something not to be worried about.
True.
Which I probably was in terms of the potential demon living in that house.
Yeah, you did have you were definitely, I feel like you're a different person than you were then. I think you were definitely holding on to, I don't know what it was, but you were like, when we, spit it out, Jeff. When we got down there, you were like, I don't like the vibe of this house.
No, I didn't say that at all. I just said this house gives me a weird feeling. And we brought down sage and we desaged it. It was just the setup of that room.
But you
and it's those moments.
You did kind of fixate on it a little bit.
No, but it's like it's like it's a joke.
But when does a joke become truth because you believe it? Back to last week's podcast where it's like it's a story, it's a joke, and then you're like, same way you can scare yourself.
If you believe it.
Yeah. But you said it several times, like, I don't like sleeping in this room, there's something up there.
No, but again, that didn't stop me from sleeping in the room, and it wasn't like looking at it. I was just like, the demon. It was a joke. It was never impacting. Sometimes people's reaction to something is the thing that actually pushes it over the edge. If I was sitting there being like, I don't want to sleep in this room, that would be, come on, like you're believing the story, but just making light of it.
Yeah.
Which is what I was doing.
Another thing that happened while we were down there is we lost power completely for a good 12 hours.
Yeah.
And then we reverted to
eating more mushrooms
and watching the movies that we did have on our computers.
Yeah, what was it? We just had our computers were charged up.
They were charged up. You had Mission Impossible 3.
No, we watched Mission Impossible 2 on Netflix, I'm pretty sure. I think we watched...
I swear you had it on your computer because we had to stop watching it because the acting, when you're on mushrooms, you could just see behind the curtain and the acting looks so wooden.
Yeah.
Like when in the car chase at the start when they're spinning around each other.
And like looking at each other. It's very like Hong Kong style.
It's directed by John Woo, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just felt so...
dramatic and theatrical.
Yeah. And then we started... And we watched The Colour of Money as well, but that was on a...
The Colour of Money was on my computer.
Yeah. Basically, each night we'd work for between 8 to 10... Each day we'd work for between 8 to 10 hours, and then we'd probably watch a movie with dinner, and if we felt like going back to it, we did. If not, we just relaxed.
Played some FIFA.
Yeah. And read and went to bed or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, we cut up some good movies. One movie in particular that was a great watch was the JFK documentary.
Yeah, the Oliver Stone JFK documentary, which I think he made into
2021.
21, yeah. Or 2020 maybe. Oliver Stone's a fantastic film director. Made some absolute bangers over the times. Natural Born Killers is a great film if you haven't seen it. Platoon, Born on the 4th of July. And JFK, which he made in the 80s. And basically, the original film goes into the conspiratorial aspects of JFK.
Yeah.
And the narrative and the Warren Commission and...
The narrative that he was assassinated by...
The CIA.
Yes. And so he made a piece of fiction then with some facts sprinkled in.
Because he was very fascinated with it.
Yeah, and he never kind of stopped being fascinated with it. And now this documentary is his distillation of all the facts.
And as more facts have come out through the Freedom of Information Act and people, there's just amateur JFK researchers that spend hours in the National Archives in America searching, looking through all this stuff. And yeah, he put together a film which is incredible.
Yeah.
And absolutely, in my mind, affirms the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was not solely responsible for killing Kennedy, and that the CIA was definitely involved.
Yeah.
And it's a really good movie. It's not, people, as soon as you say JFK or like conspiratorial documentaries, people think of like Alex Jones on YouTube
or Ancient Aliens.
And it's not. It's genuinely a solid documentary film.
It's great. It's dense.
They're very dense, but it's very clear cut, and narrated by Donald Sutherland, who was in the original JFK film.
And then don't tell them who it cuts to halfway through.
I will say she's been mentioned on the podcast in the previous 3 episodes. Not every time, but we've talked about her, and it's a lovely surprise.
It is.
But yeah, it's a great film, and we got to watch that. That's actually, I have recommended that film to more people than any other film I think I've ever recommended.
Recently, if any conversation around a table turns even mildly conspiratorial, we're like, have you seen this documentary?
Yeah.
Here's a link to watch it on like iTunes or it's on this streaming service. Treat your actual self.
That and the Dissident.
Oof. Yes. Very, very solid movies, documentaries.
Yeah.
But away from that, back to Denmark. As we are going to share more stuff, we've got we set up GoPros and caught a bunch of stuff on film, or hopefully caught some stuff on film, and looked at our creative process and things like that. And I think it'll be quite interesting to review some of that stuff and look at some of the photos we took and everything like that. It's interesting, we went through, it was very creative, then it went through a bit of a hard zone to find a creative spot to get the flow, and then it kind of came back towards the end. Is there anything you think you'd do differently if you were going to do it again?
I would definitely make a more of a switch off policy. I think it's difficult when you, at that time, I was talking to James, you've got Holly.
I think Holly was actually going through something quite serious at their place of business.
And I think
just a time, like every night you could communicate for this amount of time and then switch off, like it was like batching your communication. I think that would have encouraged flow more.
I think probably lowering my expectations.
Interesting.
I think at the moment what I'm trying to do is manage my expectations of everything I do in my life, and not necessarily lower them so they're like easy to achieve. Just like so I'm happier with when I over exceed them rather than I'm always disappointed because I'm constantly underneath them.
Yeah, it's a great way to be.
And I think I remember having, high expectations for the trip, and I would, just lower them a little bit more. I think the other thing I would do differently is have a bit more of a schedule, and we kind of did, but I'd like to experiment more with creating stranger sounds rather than going so quickly into songwriting.
Yeah.
Which is difficult because, a lot of the songs started with you're on the guitar, I'm on the keyboard, and instantly you're like, yep, play that chord or change that note. Or the bass should go here, and you're starting to write a song rather than, seeing what the MS-20 sounds like pushing through the flange on a guitar pedal.
Yeah.
I think I would have liked a bit more sound design sessions or plan that kind of thing in. I think as well, the next time I do it, I would potentially try to do it with more people.
Yeah. I think it would be a different beast to manage. Yeah. Because the way we did it was kind of like we were living in the studio.
And it is kind of easy. I think we did talk about how difficult it would be if there was a third person. It's easier when it's your brother because you're like, some mornings you're just not wearing a shirt and working on a tune, or you know, someone else is having a shower or like standing on the balcony. It's this very relaxed environment. And if there was a third person or a fourth person, or maybe there were 6 of you,
Yeah.
the house definitely wasn't big enough for it, but it might turn into a, you know, Jeff and John are at the helm and Seb and Rob are doing something else. Oh, we're going to go into the Denmark for a couple of hours, and like it fractures.
Yeah, because that was also something we did pretty well, is to like have enough food and everything that we kind of got through the first 2 or 3 days without any external communication.
Yeah.
We just like really focused and zeroed in.
Yeah.
I think that was part of the fun.
Yeah.
As well.
It was fun. It was like an adventure thing. You know, like at the end of the day, work got done and it was fantastic for work and fantastic for creativity. But this, like, you know, we do this because it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
And there should be elements of fun to the work, and putting yourself in, you know, a treehouse in Denmark is fun. The idea of like, we're going to set up our studio and like, we're going to do that.
And that ups the juices of creativity.
It does up the juices of creativity. And it's also, I remember driving down and we're like, we've talked about doing this kind of thing for ages and now we're doing it.
Yeah.
And it makes you excited. And I think that like any nervousness about whether or not you're going to write a good song when you sit down and turn on the computer for the first time dissipates pretty quickly. And it's replaced by just like, oh, that's a cool note.
Yeah.
That's a cool sound.
And we came away with it with a bunch of demos, and we kind of thought these might be on the album, but in the end we also just kept writing tunes.
Yeah.
As we needed them, and it's like, that needs to be better, different. We need a song like this actually, and we just kept going, which means we kept going with the album writing process.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a case of just turning up, they're the 20 songs we're going to choose from.
Yeah.
Or the 10 songs we're going to release. We had to constantly iterate on new things.
And I think that's kind of how we write music. Like, our demos are pretty demo-y. You know, the difference between our first run demo and the final product is pretty vast. It's actually one of the things that we've talked about wanting to do better this year is have more polished demos so there's less distance between the final product.
Also just get there faster. Like if you're going to back yourself making a certain sound or a certain thing, do it properly.
Yeah,
rather than being
don't be like, I've worked on this for an hour, but you know what it could sound like.
Yeah,
just do it. That's the sound.
Yeah, because we could always make it sound like something we could.
Yeah.
And we do have, you know, great imaginations. So sometimes that can get in the way of lowering expectations as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it was a great trip. And I think I can't wait to do it again. And maybe in a different location. Maybe in the same location. Perhaps we'll get a discount.
I wonder if anyone's gone and done that in that same place again. I asked him, but when I booked it, I was like, has anyone done this type of thing? And I told him about the plan. He was like, no, not that I've heard of.
Yeah.
I was like, it's such a sick location.
I know someone that knows that house.
Really?
Yeah, their friend has a house nearby and they recognise the house.
It's a sick place.
It's a great spot.
Like going down to like the beach and the rocks. Yeah, and I think doing it in winter. I love down south in winter. I think I'd like to do a winter retreat somewhere. Obviously in a studio that you weren't affected by the sound of rain, but there was a large glass wall that looked out upon a expansive.
What were you saying about lowering expectations?
And this is all in Iceland.
It could be done. It could be done.
Yeah. And that was really fun. And I, going back through all this footage and looking at photos and editing down those 9 hours, we got 60 hours of GoPro footage to go through. And it's going to be interesting to relive some of those moments. And I know for a fact there's moments where we're like writing those songs and like.
There's also moments where we're fighting.
Yeah, I think there is moments where we're fighting.
I remember there being like one moment we're having a big argument and it was like, should we turn the GoPro off kind of thing? It was like, no. That's what happens. People probably won't see that, but I remember just being like, it's not all perfect communication. I wish we had crystal clear communication with each other, but I don't think anyone does with anyone, and that's what we're always working on, especially in the creative world where there is this semi-telekinesis that we have between each other.
Yeah.
Where like I can say, oh, just change that, and you know exactly what I mean, or you can say like, oh man, if it just had more, and I finish your sentence.
Yeah.
That's an advantage, but also a disadvantage, and it can lead to some friction.
Because you can get used to it.
Yes.
And then when it's not there, you're like, why the fuck aren't you thinking like I'm thinking?
Why aren't you reading my mind?
Yeah.
But we definitely had a lot of laughs, and I'm sure you'll see some of that.
Glenn Buterol.
There were just some stupid things that made us laugh. We made a drink, and we'll share that with you over time. And the maybe we'll start by sharing the tour, or I don't know what you're going to start with. I don't know what kind of footage we're going to start with, but I think we've got lots of stuff that we're looking forward to showcasing from the album writing trip.
Yeah.
Since writing the album, I'm trying to get back into listening to more drum and bass, particularly listening to sets, as we talked about the other week.
Yep.
But also just, going through playlists and trying to expose myself to stuff that's may not necessarily come across my plate.
Yep.
But I'm also trying to listen to an album. I'll do it today in the gym. I listen to an album that I should know that I don't.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing to do.
And I just press play at the start, and because sometimes I'll listen to a podcast. If I'm listening to a really good podcast, I could be sitting there doing deadlifts and playing a podcast, which is sometimes weird.
Yeah,
I just can get in that zone.
I can't really listen to podcasts at the gym unless I'm doing cardio.
Yeah, I understand. I get that. Burps. But yeah, so have you got a suggestion for an album I could listen to? I listened to Blood Sugar Sex Magic the other week because the Red Hot Chili Peppers were in town. And then I listened to I'm about to sneeze and my brain's just
Look at the light.
Does it make you sneeze?
I think it makes you sneeze.
I think the sun only has that reaction. Oh, I still feel like I'm about to sneeze. Anyway, I listened to something else. Have you got an album I could listen to?
Have you listened to Led Zeppelin 1?
No. Great.
Bang.
Sick. I did listen to a bunch of Nirvana stuff as well as I was reading the Dave Grohl book a while ago. What else has come across? Sometimes just grabbing at something. So I'm not listening to... trying not to just go through playlists. I'm like, I think it was when we were in album mode, I was listening to albums.
Yeah.
I want to try and come across that. But something else that came into my head the other day, like I listened to Blood Sugar Sex Magic by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Oh, wait, there's those songs. Like, this is great. And I was like, but I'm going to have to listen to this album like 6 or 7 times if it was going to become a really good thing. And I was like, wow, me, someone who loves an album, is not doing that. That's my listening habits have completely changed.
It's funny that our listening habits have changed, yet we're expecting someone to ingest our whole album like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have to, I guess, practice what we are trying to preach. One, and also manage our expectations on how people are going to ingest the album.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, our album isn't so connected that you couldn't listen to any of the songs in a vacuum.
But it's also got a
flow.
A flow. It's not just an album of singles.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter what order you start in. It's a thought out order.
Yeah.
Which I think is I don't know. I think that's what I wanted to do creatively.
Yeah, I think it was important that we executed on our creative goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. The album is out in July.
Yeah.
The next single's out soon. We'll probably be making some noise about it
Tomorrow.
and yeah, as we say often, I can't wait to share it with you. And that's really how I feel. I get excited, get giddy about like revealing things.
I re-listened to it the other day and was reminded that it's good. Or that I thought it was good,
Yeah,
which is important.
that's really important. When I was going through the masters the other week, I was like, oh yeah, this song's cool.
Yeah.
I like this one. Jonathan, what have you learned this week?
It's difficult. What have I learnt this week? I have learnt that I can actually drive home from work a more pleasant way and go through Mount Hawthorn. And it's slightly more satisfying than going by the freeway. It's a little bit leafier.
Yeah.
You go through just a nicer suburb. There's people walking dogs.
You know, there's an app that guides you. Probably doesn't do it in Perth. So it probably should be able to based on like metadata of maps. But it gives you like a way to walk home that has more trees.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah. Maybe more circuitous, but yeah, you see more nature.
Green. Well, Perth's such a green place, even though sometimes that green is actually brown. But it's not, you know, there's trees everywhere. And it's lovely that it's like that, especially where, you know, the area that we live in. But yeah, it takes 5 minutes longer, but it's more satisfying.
Yeah.
And I've always loved that area, like that back end of Mount Hawthorn.
It's a beautiful spot.
Mm.
I learnt that I really love Chev.
Chev is your and Holly's cat?
Yeah. And I mean, I've always known it, but there's been some, since when we went away last year, he's, you know, he was a bit shocked and then he came back to like visiting the house. Let me just say this again. He comes in basically every night.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's since, you know, kind of getting back at the start of the year, he started to come in the morning to the point where we'll walk out and we'll see him on his little day bed and we'll be like, hey, come in. And he'll come in and then he'll just like, you know, hang around as we like, you know, it could be really early when we go back to bed or it could be quite early and we're just chatting in bed. But he, like, sometimes he'll come into bed. And then recently there's been some great moments where he's just come into bed and then we've all just fallen back to sleep. I'll show you a photo after the podcast of the three of us just asleep in the bed.
That's beautiful. Who took the photo?
The next door neighbor who was looking through the window. It was really cool.
Magical.
Yeah, no, I kind of woke up and I was like, I should try and catch a photo of this. But I've always wanted an animal that could like come into bed, you could chat to, and he was cool and you could snuggle with, and then he's got his own attitude now.
Animals were never allowed in the bed in the Hanson house.
No, they were not. So this is a cool thing to realize in my life. And I'm not sure if it's necessarily something I've learnt because I've always known.
Sounds like it's an affirmation.
Yeah. So, yeah. Shout out to Chev.
Hey, Chev.
The grey man, the greyest one.
The grey long boy.
Yeah. Grey man Myanmar.
Thanks for having this conversation with me, buddy. I love you.
I love you.
And I will speak to you next week.
You will. See you, buddy.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. We are Ekko and Sidetrack on all social media. We've recently updated our YouTube. Go and give that a subscribe so you can keep up to date with all the latest video podcasts. And follow us on Spotify too so you can keep up to date with all our latest music releases. Big up.